Rules. Without them, we live with the animals. To quote the John Wick franchise, which is quite apt, really, because their whole barter economy of favours for gold, I think is very apt. Now, rules when it comes to investing in gold and silver are very important, but they're also a little bit of a stacker's dichotomy because we don't like rules. If you're a stacker, you know that you want to take money out of the establishment, out of that financial system to protect your money. I know that having gold and silver is really good from my perspective to own something real that's not just made up numbers on a screen. I can rely on gold and silver more than I can money in a bank. That's just my humble opinion, not trying to give financial advice. And a balance is always needed. But those rules, to quote another famous actress in a famous sitcom, rules help control the fun. And look, I get it. I understand that people don't like rules and don't like the idea of having to pay and declare taxes. But speaking firsthand from somebody who has been audited by HMRC last year, they came and they looked at my bookkeeping, they looked at my personal tax records. I haven't done anything wrong and I was happy to share that information. Getting it right, following those rules, super important. And if you don't, you might think it's just a bit of fun and we can say to the taxman, you know, sod off, go on, off you go, come and get it if you think you're hard enough. That's not a responsible adult way to handle this situation. Being conscientious about your investments, smart, making the right choices, and following the rules is important. So I want to talk about that today and why I believe it is super important to do and the ways that we can follow the rules and still maximize some of the gains on our precious metals. We've got some big silver bars out here, which we're going to test on the Sigma, which is also a great little segue into following, say, rules, but responsibilities. If you're buying stuff like these gold and silver coins or bars from third parties or even mainstream bullion dealers, because I have had fake gold coins from a mainstream bullion dealer, it is really important to make sure that you're testing them. So I'm going to show how I test these big chunky silver bars here on this video. If you want more information on the Sigmas, Trusty Metrics are the proud sponsor and we're the brand ambassador for them. So go and check them out. Links in the description box below. So rules. Okay, listen, I've been a stickler for rules pretty much my entire life. I come from a commercial background which works with and in businesses to follow rules and make sure that we're doing everything right by the rules, such that, you know, if things go wrong, you as a business, you as an individual are covered. And it is very important to do that, because if you don't do that, you could be facing some very serious penalties and or potentially even criminal liabilities. And that's not something that anybody wants to get involved with. Fantastic. This bar is in the green. Love it. This is the extension, this is the bridge extension to the Pro. Really great. As I said, links in the description box below if you want to find out more about these machines. But that is a fantastic, lovely bar of silver testing perfectly on the machine. So following rules from a business perspective is really important. I've always talked about that. I've not beaten about the bush at all about the fact that I've been a business here for my poured silver side of things for a very long time. I have good record keeping, I have good bookkeeping, as is backed up by the fact that I got audited by HMRC last year and everything was fine. But the fact that we are in a society now that is even more, pried upon by the authorities and the powers that be, I think it's very important that we always make sure we are following the rules. And it's not just that you're covering yourself, but it's also the fairest thing to do. But listen, it's dog eat dog out there. And the people that, I've said this before, people who have to break the rules to make their business work, that's not a business. If you're breaking rules to make your business work, then in my opinion, you are not a good business person, and B, your business isn't going to be particularly good for the long term. Got a 500 gram bar here. This one is testing just fine. It's a little bit small for the bridge because it's not quite covering the whole things, but we've still got green and just about green there. But the yellow is also a fine result for this, so that is fantastic. Not following the rules in business is so dumb these days because businesses are even more controlled than private individuals. You know, there's a lot of new people who've joined the world of precious metal businesses at the moment. Now, this Geiger bar, first of all, this one's got some additional security features in its own right. because it's a beautiful bar, but we are going to stick it right under here because it does fit. I have tried it. Look at that, fantastic. And it's going to be in the green. Although this one is slightly up in the yellow, but that's fine. As I said, yellow is a good result. So many new people have come into precious metal collecting, stacking and investing, and there is money to be made. We can't ignore that fact. There is a volatile nature to this market which allows people to buy silver at a certain price and then flip it for a higher price a couple of weeks later. Now the problem here from a rules perspective is that HMRC won't know straight away that you're not a business. If you're doing large volumes of silver trading, you need to start thinking about those rules and following those rules, because if you don't, you will get caught out. Nowadays, the big brother nature of silver and gold, well, not just silver and gold, banking and eBay and PayPal and all of these institutions that you might use to help you sell things, even your bank accounts, will be reported to HMRC. They will know. When I was audited, they had records, they had data from my sales that I'd made just of old random stuff like Magic the Gathering cards on eBay. And, you know, they weren't particularly like threatening that I was breaking rules because, well, I wasn't. But at the same time, it was a little bit like, well, you need to make sure that you are doing things right. Otherwise, they're going to know. And so when I see businesses that so I'm not going to call out and name particular individual businesses, but there are plenty of them that I can pretty much guarantee are not following all the rules because they are, you know, they're sort of, what's the word? They're a means unto themselves in terms of the, now this bar you'll see here is testing quite a long way up into the yellow, potentially the red, but there we go, it's back in the green. It's because it's just on the cusp of not being quite big enough to go onto the bridge, but it has given us a positive result there. Fantastic. So there are a lot of small businesses that will be flouting the rules, whether that's the taxation rules, whether it's VAT registration rules, whether it's, you know, they've registered for the second-hand margin scheme, but they're selling brand new bullion instead, and they're just trying to get away with it. I've heard and seen reports of small traders, both not within sort of Chamber of Commerce I'm a member of here, in the UK, and I've seen plenty of examples of small businesses that become unstuck with the rules because they haven't either followed them properly or they've not looked into them properly and got the correct advice, or the advice they've had is just a bit blasé from, you know, your mate down the pub who's doing it a certain way and hasn't been caught yet. Now, how does this relate to you as an individual? Because you might not be a business, but honestly, if you are buying and selling stuff, you might end up getting unstuck by this because HMRC will just throw a blanket hammer at everybody. A blanket hammer, is that the right phrase? They'll just do a blanket approach. They'll send out thousands of snotty, nasty letters to people. That's their approach. That's their tactic to scare people. And if you then start sending stuff to HMRC, which is deliberately hiding some of your activities or not being truthful, that's when you start getting really severely penalized. So if you are doing a little bit of buying and selling of precious metals, because perhaps you think, okay, you know what, I'm going to save some money in my life with some precious metals, and that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with this. I don't want to put people off. If you want to buy a sovereign to save a little bit of money, and then perhaps you need to sell that sovereign down the line because something's come up, an unexpected bill has come up, then there is absolutely nothing wrong with selling your gold, but make sure that you have the records for it, because if you don't have the records for it, a few things are potentially, and in my opinion, very likely to happen. First up, you're going to get questioned by your bank. That is just how things are at the moment. There's a very good chance, if you do any kind of volume of things, at some point your bank might say, excuse me, could you just explain why you've got so much money coming into your account from lots of random different people? Your bank might then say to you, are you a business? And it might be against the terms and conditions of your bank. And that would be a pretty, this happened to me a long time ago when I just got started. I was maybe about a year in. I got told off by my bank. They rang me out of the blue and said, you've had quite a lot of money come in and out of your account over the last year. We think you might be running a business. And I was like, yeah, I am. I said, you know, that's against the terms and conditions of your bank, or of our terms and conditions for this bank account. I thought, oh. Now, just for context, in the UK, you can't run a business, a limited company business from your own personal bank account. But as a sole trader, yes, you can do that. But it is basically against bank's terms and conditions. They could have quite happily just closed my account and debanked me, but they didn't. Now, you'll notice this gold sovereign's just a little bit off into the red there. This would not necessarily something I'm super worried about, but it's something that I would want to maybe have another second look at just a little bit more closely. It's not something, though, I'm going to put it to one side and we'll have a look at it off camera another time, but it's not a big problem. So yeah, the The rules following is really important, and if you don't do it, you are going to come unstuck. As an individual, you have a responsibility also to keep records in terms of capital gains and taxes. Now, where that is a real sort of good thing is things like sovereigns. These are completely capital gains tax exempt. Now, with the changes of potential government coming in over the next couple of weeks and months, I don't think we're going to see a complete U-turn on capital gains tax exempt products. What I think is very likely is I think we'll see the rates of tax that you pay on capital gains go up. I do think that is likely to happen, and potentially even the annual allowance of which you don't have to pay any CGT on your profits will come down, so thereby bringing more tax in. Although it's one of these contrary things, I don't like to get too political on my channel, but if you were like me and you've bought some silver or gold, I picked up the wrong things really, because these are business assets for me to chop up and melt. And look, don't worry, I might not chop up this bar. I'll talk a bit more about this in a second, but basically I've bought some silver to chop up and melt down. And the point here though is that from a CGT perspective, if you buy this and you're faced potentially with a 40% tax bill because you're a higher rate taxpayer, you're probably just not going to bother selling it. So it's a contrary sort of idea that they're going to raise more taxes from this, because quite frankly, a load of more people are just going to sit on their investments, certainly in the world of gold and silver, not bother selling it, and wait until the rules change, or wait until the thresholds change, or wait until a new government gets in and they change or scrap CGT entirely, or change the rules, or even just wait 10, 15 years until you stop working or until you lose a job and you're no longer a higher rate taxpayer, and then you can sell it at the lower rates of tax. That's certainly something that I've considered doing for my own personal investments. Not just in gold and silver either, but in stocks and shares. So they will change rules. Rules will change. Tax rules will change at some point, I have no doubt. How they'll change, I don't know. That's the problem. And so record keeping is really, really important, because if you were forced to sell something, so let's do this as a prime example. So this was bought through my business for melting. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of you out there who are going to scream at the camera saying, for God's sake, Backyard Bullion, don't chop up and melt down a 1 kilo Geiger bar. What I will say though is a few things. First up, there's a really great big dent in the corner of this, so it's not a perfect pristine condition bar. Second, if I buy this now, I lock in a price. If I can then at some point liquidate this to swap out for silver that is more easy able for me to melt down and sell, or potentially sell this for a small gain and then buy a piece of silver that I can melt down, then that works for me. It's almost like a bit of a mini hedge. To own the silver now is important. So that's what I'm doing with this one. It's not necessary that I'm going to chop it up. That said, if you want to buy it, I'm not selling it right now because there's no point in me selling it right now. I would, I'd probably break even on it if I asked for the same price as what I paid for it. So there's just no point. So from my perspective, it's very much just a little bit of a hedge to see what happens. And in the worst cases, I will chop it up and I will melt it down and I'll have absolutely no regrets, and you'll hate me for doing it, but that's just the life cycle of silver. Sometimes things get chopped up and melted down. Same is for these other silver bars here, although I have to say this beautiful Heraeus bar is rather tasty, and I'm a big fan of big chunky silver bars. But you know what? From a rules perspective, it is very important, and I see it every day, almost every week. People just like, oh, all my silver and gold are lost in an unfortunate boating accident, or you think it's things like, so here's a good one: inheritance tax. Now in the UK, we have to pay ridiculous rates of inheritance tax if you have more money than, or more in your estate left over when you die than the current thresholds. Now for a single individual, that's £325,000 in assets, and an additional £175,000 for your home, which you can then leave to your children or grandchildren. So if you're an unmarried single individual with no children, basically you're a bit buggered, because all you'll have is your £325,000 allowance. Now, if you are single and you haven't had kids, and I can tell you firsthand, kids are bloody expensive and they take up a lot of your money, and they will for their entire life cycle, even beyond when they're 18 plus. So if you've got money that you've earned your entire career because you haven't got children, there's a good chance your estate is going to be worth more than a certain amount of £325,000, especially if you own your own home. So if you're sitting there and thinking, I'm going to buy gold, I'm going to leave it to, I don't know, your brothers or your sisters or your nephews and nieces or whatever, that sounds like a really noble and wonderful thing to do. But the fact of the matter remains is that there will be a ridiculous 40% tax levied on the gold that you leave, and people will get that. They will find that. The probate solicitors will know about that. Now, if you are off the books and don't follow the rules, What happens when your niece or nephew, your brother or your sister go and cash that in to the bank? They're going to get anti-money laundered. They're going to get money laundering checked. And I've had to do that as well. Just from putting £2,000 into a bloody regular savings bank account on a new bank. I opened up a new bank account, transferred the money in, put it into the savings account, got a snotty email the next morning saying, we would like to carry out an anti-money laundering check on you. You need to provide us with 5 years worth of proof of income and all of this, or we'll just be closing your account. And I told them to bugger off because, first of all, I don't mind doing that when it's really kind of required, but £2,000 for 5 years, I'm sorry, no. It's just ridiculous. So I told them where to stuff it. However, the next week, I got another request from a completely separate institution to do with some of my stocks and shares investments. So, of course, that one's a little bit more important, and I did that. And it's fine to do that. There's nothing to hide about it, but there is a privacy element here. There's a individual sort of not wanting to share every single thing about your whole bloody life to the establishment about that does concern me. So I told them all that they needed to know and passed with flying colours, as did I do with HMRC when I got audited. And it is just what it is, there are rules to follow, otherwise we live with the animals. We might not like that, and you might be watching this thinking, well, hang on, why bother buying gold and silver if you don't want to keep it off the books from the powers that be? Well, that's just not the right way to go about it. And I look at it like this: if I was off the books doing things not so above board, yeah, you could make a bit of extra money. You could not pay a bit of capital gains tax, or you could, I don't know, dodge some income tax from your business perspective, or, for example, like hallmarking charges on bits of poured silver that I do. I hallmark everything I do, whether it's defined as legally required to or not. I just do it. But I see constantly other pourers of silver here in the UK flagrantly ignore hallmarking rules, and they just get away with it because, of course, they do. And it's unfair. It's unfair for other people who follow the rules because it's the right thing to do. And that's the kind of person that I want to be. I want to be doing the right things. Funny thing, I'll leave you with this for you guys. I've got a young child. I've got 2 young children. And one of them said to me the other day, he said, one of my friends said I was bad at nursery today because I asked him in the car on the way home, were you a good boy today at nursery? He said, yeah, I was a good boy, but one of my friends said I was bad. I said, oh, why was that? I don't know. He said I was bad. Am I bad? And I said, no, you're not bad. But I said, sometimes you might do things that other people don't like, and sometimes people just won't like you for whatever reason. You can't ever know. Sometimes that's just how people are. And the most important thing is how you act when nobody else is watching you. And he sort of, I don't know if he really fully got it. He's not quite at the age to really comprehend that full logic of it. But that's the kind of thing that I want to bring up my children to understand. It's about what you do when nobody else is watching that defines whether you really are a good person or not. And so following the rules, from my perspective, makes me a good person. Does it mean I pay a bit more tax? Does it mean that I am bad in your eyes because you think I shouldn't pay as much tax? No. I don't want to have the hassle of going through audits or going through, regulatory requirements to prove my innocence on stuff, which I could just quite easily do if I follow the rules. All that for a few extra bucks, which I don't quite frankly need or want. Anyway. So we're getting a bit wax lyrical by the end of here, but I thought that was really interesting from a growth perspective from a young child to sort of realize that, and it was a hard thing to hear as a parent. Am I bad? But he's a good boy, and I think that if we bring him up in the right way, and it's at some point this stuff might end up being my kids, and I do worry about how that's going to impact them, and not just from suddenly they've got some wealth that they need to think out about what to do with, but how is it going to impact them from a tax perspective? How is it going to impact them from making sure that they follow the rules? Because if I just gifted them all of this stuff and they cashed it in to buy a house, what if they got anti-money laundered and they didn't have the right records? So I, as an adult, I as a parent, I have to have those records bang on right now. Follow the rules. Don't treat it as a joke. It's a responsible thing. You have responsibilities, because without the rules, we live with the animals, to quote John Wick once again. Or I think it was Winston actually in the films. So yeah, there we go. That's my thoughts and my ramblings for today. Thank you all, cool kids. What should we get you to quote? It's got to be a serial number. We're going to go old school, and this Haraeus bar is a beauty. So quote me 082907 down in the comment section, and I will know that you are cool. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video. As always, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.